Hey folks, Phil Davis at Ancestry Lands, AncestryLands.com. Just came from the gym right now. Want to talk to you folks about something that's very important. You have to prepare for you have to prepare and sacrificing for the things that you want. This goes about a story about my daughter, for all the people who know my daughter, Penelope. I've talked before in different videos about my daughter skipping a grade, and she skipped third grade to go to fourth grade. And then in middle school, she actually skipped a 2 grades. So she's 2 grades in math, not in her regular grade, but she normally would be in 5th grade. She's in 6th grade now. And during 6th grade, they're doing pre-algebra. 6th grade here is middle school, even though when I went to school, 6th grade was elementary school. But when I talk to my daughter, we have her GIEP meeting, which is her gifted educational implementation plan, or, the words might different, but when your child excels and exceeds the level of performance and they're able to skip, or they're being advanced, like my son and my daughter both in advanced math class, and they go to school with a lot of Indian children from India. And a lot of the kids are in advanced math too as well. So my daughter now has an opportunity to skip algebra. And when I say skip algebra, meaning that she can test out of algebra. One of the things that I've learned about being in the affluent area where I live at, that I'm going to try to impart upon people who are looking to live in affluent areas, or areas where people are affluent. And when I mean by affluent, I mean that people well off. A lot of people that my daughter goes to school with, that I've coached on teams with, I've coached other kids, they drive electric vehicles, Porsches, Ferraris. I mean, the Ferrari dealership is literally right around the corner from here, my location right now. The Tesla dealerships, the high-end luxury cars, the Rivians, you see all of that out here. Where people, they live in affluence, they have the luxury cars, the luxury lives, the wives look as plastic as they can be, which is fine, or they've had enough surgeries, they don't look like a normal woman who's had 3-4 kids. They can pay to play. In this area, which I've had to tell my wife about, not that it's racial, but a lot of it is bias. People would easily go to racism as a causality of why certain barriers or hurdles are in life. And I would say that some of it might be true. But again, if we look at the example that cultures present to other cultures, well, then the example is what they have to go off of. It's not like, when you think of African Americans, you think of African Americans as being doctors, lawyers, neuroscientists, chemists, biologists. And I don't mean drug dealers as chemists and biologists. I mean actual science and biology, and science and chemists. Long gone are the days of the George Washington Carvers and the Garrett Morgans and many of the other people, Henry Louis Latimer, the people who invented things that help society. What you see now is the Kendrick Lamars. You see entertainers, you see athletes. You don't see nurses. When you don't think black, and you don't think doctors and nurses. And if you do think doctors and nurses, they're usually from Africa. Nigerians, people from Kenya. They're not African Americans, people born in America. With my wife, she's starting to see that a little bit when we are looking at my daughter being advanced. And I've talked about this in other videos. When your child is a child that is not what's thought of to be the intelligent cultures and races, this would be for white children too as well, because the children that are more advanced than my daughter, not because they are more advanced, they can test more, as they've been actually giving the doorways to advance, are all Asian. Because when we think mathematics, we think of Asians being smart in mathematics, right? Just like when you think of money, typically you might think of Jewish people with, being good with money. That's where our mind goes to associate with certain cultures and races, if you will. Or ethnicities, I'll say, because race is not, race is more of a concept. So with my daughter, the school does not want her to skip algebra because they feel that algebra, they can teach algebra better And their algebra is so much better than algebra, which was created by, I believe, the what would have been Egyptian or Muslim culture. It started all the way back in Muslim cultures where, people of color invented algebra, mathematics. But all of a sudden now, this district, the affluent district, which is predominantly white, thinks that they have the mathematic game figured out. And I keep telling, my wife and other people too, algebra is algebra. Depending on how it's taught is pretty much the difference between how well you get it or how you find workarounds to solving algebraic equations. But algebra is algebra. It's not like, political science where there's some theories and you got to test them or they could be argued against. The equation has an answer, and it's one answer. In algebra. In math, generally there's one answer on how to solve a problem. The way to solve it is very different. But who gives a damn if she can solve it a different way from where the school is taught if the answer is correct? Because a lot of times they try to get on, show your work, and that's so that way you can't cheat and use a computer. But realistically, can she get to the right answer using different methods? They teach math very differently. And Asian countries as they do in Indian countries, the way to solve it is irrelevant to the fact that you can actually come up with the correct answer. I don't give a damn if you were using a collection of sticks and rocks and you could solve the algebraic equation, or you could use a calculator. If you both can get to the same answer, they're both right, correct? That's what tests are for. They're to test if you are proficient in understanding and can answer the correct information. So the school has put up hurdles. In fact, we went through 2 one-hour parent-teacher conferences with these GIEP meetings to actually get to the point where we understood that there was a possibility for my daughter to accelerate. And that only came after me asking kind of poignant questions, because the first meeting was about her math. My daughter went from 83 or 81 to a 93 in the second semester marking period. Now, in the third marking period, she pretty much has a roundabout A. And I asked the teacher, the doctor, who also has a child in 6th grade, because you let people talk long enough, you'll figure out things about them. She said, well, she's not at the top. And I said, well, shit, 95. I mean, what is, she needs to get 100? What's the difference in an A minus, and an A? Realistically, nothing. In the fact that they're an A. I mean, for a child conceptually at 10 or 11 years old, an A is an A. An A plus, an A minus. A lot of people would just settle on a 90 because it's still an A. So I don't understand where we put these extra layers on performance because, well, you got an A, but it's not a high A, but it's still an A. All right. It's not an 89 because we will be arguing, how come you can't just round up to an A? You say, well, it's not a 90. See how they just keep pushing that bar up. So any which way, I asked him, I said, well, why is my daughter not in algebra? If she's accelerating, we're halfway there and she's already got, her scores are jumping up dramatically and drastically, and she's maintaining those scores. So you want her just to maintain an A instead of working hard to overcome and achieve an A. And that helps the school look good because they can show that their students have better scores. So remember, that's part of it. Because when you have students who have high scores, 1, 2, 3, 4 marking periods, when they go to test, the school gets credit for those students being at above level. And that helps the school when they go to get funding, when they look at drawing in other students of value. That means that the surrounding area gets more affluent families, which means they get more revenue from tax dollars. And we pay a lot of money for school taxes, which is a separate line item when you pay property taxes. So I understand the game being a real estate guy. And I go and ask my daughter, do you have kids in your grade, 6th grade, that take algebra? Because my daughter takes pre-algebra. She said, yeah, about 3 or 4 of them. And I said, so, what race are they? What ethnicity? They're all Asian. One of the kids is in her class. He takes that. And I told my wife, I told you that. I said, it wouldn't be an issue if I was Asian and my wife was Asian and there would be more openness and willingness to do that. It happened the same thing when I look at the videos about my daughter skipping in elementary school and my son skipping elementary school. I literally had the same conversations every time we went to the school. Now, instead of arguing why my daughter deserves to skip, I asked him just to test her, because that's the best thing you can do is put your child in to test. If you could give her the test, give her the opportunity. If she fails, no problem. You know what? I'll back off. You won't hear me say nothing else. I'll just sit here and say, yes, sir, master, and we're good. But if she does pass, then we understand that we've been held back. And one of the things that I push back on is when they told us that we agreed to the interventions or the recommendations of the school system. Well, in this school system, they will not skip you 3 grades above level, meaning if you're in 6th grade, they won't immediately skip you to 9th grade, even if you test for it, because that's the school's limitations. They will only skip you 2 grades inside one school year. So you can eventually be 3 grade levels above, but they won't do that if you excel. So even if you're brilliant enough to test it, the school has limitation. The school district has limitations on whether or not they will skip you up because they have their rules and procedures. But it doesn't matter if you can test for it, they still will put that limitation on you. And I told her, I said, well, hey, when my daughter skipped in elementary school, when we went to middle school, we had no idea that she was actually going to accelerate again in 5th grade. And then when we got to 6th grade, she was actually going to be able to skip another level in math. Who would have thunk it, right? Who would think that a 8 going on 9-year-old would actually be qualifying for pre-algebra in that year, that would actually skip up beyond, well, I don't even know what the past mathematical level was. But again, what I'm trying to impart on people is not look at my daughter's success. It's just that even when you do achieve, people will still place barriers. They will still put weight on you to stop your acceleration pathway. So where are we now? Instead of them opening the door for my daughter to accelerate again, because again, I've talked about the challenges. Why is she not challenged? I'm actually tired of my daughter bringing home A's. And I said that to them. You don't bring a challenge to a female that is looking to achieve in a world when you continuously make things where she only has to maintain and she doesn't have to achieve. And I'm not trying to put down women. I'm just saying for a young child, she needs to be able to overcome adversity. And when life brings her adversity, she's going to struggle because she's never faced it before. My job as a father is not to raise my daughter in the school grade she's in. It's to look at her life far beyond being in 6th grade to understand the challenges she's going to have as an adult and to prepare her for it. And it's also, when you are a leader, you're supposed to look and guide everyone to understand that's where your vision is. So the school can never tell me about where she's at, how young she is according to, her classmates because she skipped a grade. It's about she's always going to be around older people. Hell, I work with people 20 years my younger. I'm 20 years older than a lot of nurses that I work with on the floor. Does that mean that I'm a better nurse than they are? In some ways, through experience, yes. But that doesn't always mean that I'm right in everything that I do. Some of the things I do could be outdated. And some of the nurses could have more of the brand newer knowledge that I didn't because they just came out of school. But we both have to compete in the floor that we're on to make sure we maintain and get a job and can market ourselves in the industry. Whether I've got 22 years or they've got 2 years, it's still the same hustle and race. Everybody's got to run it. We just have better positioning because I have more experience. Well, that's part of the game. It was the same way when I was 22 and working with nurses who were 40 and 50 years as a nurse. That's part of where you have to compete. And the one thing I see is that after 2 hours, which you're only supposed to get I don't think an hour is supposed to go, but we had to have another meeting because I'm showing my daughter I'm fighting. Now that the door has been opened, because again, you have to spend time talking and learning from that. The thing we're doing now is we have a tutor that's going to come by and tutor her twice a week. So when people say, Phil, you live in an apartment and stuff like this, well, the tutor is $75 an hour. And a lot of this tutor wants cash. And then we got to pay $500 to keep the other child tutored because don't forget my daughter and my son, we're tutoring 4 times in a month. That's $500. And that's just us paying at minimum. Okay. That's on that. Then the kids need swimming lessons. Then they want to do softball. Then there's summer camps. In that just aspect, you could be looking at paying $2,000, $3,000 a month. Well, hell, the rent is $2,000 on top of that. That's $5,000. So you got to start looking at how much you make now. To look at affording a house, sometimes you just don't have the excess budget to do that. I love being a nurse, but nursing does not pay enough to live a luxury lifestyle in an area where The houses are at, I saw a house for $475. Man, that thing had baseboard heating. It looked run down. It needed a total rehab. Nice, good houses with 3, 4, 5 bedrooms with 2, 3, 4 bathrooms going to run $900,000 easily in this area. And they don't necessarily need to be totally up to date. Just because of the area alone. When you start to get to affordable housing, you either got to go to Philly or you got to go to places where there are more animals than humans. Which means that you are not going to get the benefit of the schooling and educational prowess for your children. So when you want to go to areas where the education is rich and the affluence is high, you may have to decide on sacrificing something. Now, I could do like a lot of parents do. I can make sure I have a house. I can make sure my stuff is good and my life is great. And I could look at my kids as having less to be prepared for in life. But then when you do that, when you become a grandparent, you got to kind of pay your kids get in this debt. Then you got to come and pay their debt. They asking you for $5,000 to pay off credit cards and they begging you for money. And they're asking, why did my brother get this and that? And it's a whole bunch of bullshit because if you give them the $5,000, they're going to be back in debt anyway, because how the hell did they get into $5,000 debt, right? I mean, when you taking me out to professional football games just a few months ago, then you come back and ask me for $5,000, I'm going to be like, well, why the fuck you take me to the game then? If you're going to ask, you could have just saved me that money. And when you spend $300, $400, $500 on a kid's birthday party, and then you say you are $5,000 or $10,000 worth of debt, you need $5,000 to make it right. I mean, your spending habits are fucked up, right? And as a parent, that's your burden and cross to bear, because if you don't, then you got a problem with your kids, right? So why invest that money later on and lose that money at a time where you're 66, 67, and then you're going to have problems with your income is not the same. Now, I remember I went to my dad and say, yo, Dad, I need $10K, but that was because I was looking at buying a massive amount of properties. I gave my dad money like back in less than 30 days with interest. Just because I was saying, look, let me hold over because I was looking to make an investment, a money grab or a property grab. So when I ask for it, I'm paying you back with interest. I'm not coming and asking for a loan or to borrow and never pay back. And I did that more than once. We just changing money because it's business. So when I tell my daughter this now, and I don't want to belabor the point on this, and I'm just showing y'all things, I had to actually go to my daughter and say, hey, here's the situation. I've opened up a doorway for you. I put you in position to be able to excel and accelerate through this school. And, again, my wife was like, yeah, she could skip the next grade geometry, but, they don't want her to skip algebra. And I said, well, if you skip an easy thing, it's really not a skip or a hard thing. If it's so easy to skip, why the hell do you even have the class in the first place? You want her to skip the easy thing, but to me, the accomplice is skipping the hard thing, the thing she got to work for, right? So I told my daughter, here's what we fought for, everything I've just capped over or explained to you all right now. And I asked my daughter, I said, listen, you got to understand that you got another Davis coming up behind you, your brother. He's 2 years younger. So they're gonna put him with the same hurdle and wall that they put on you, just on GP, general principle. But what's going to happen is if you don't take this challenge and succeed, or you take the challenge and you get close, whatever you do, but if you walk away from this, the door will shut for your brother permanently. And then your other brother, it will shut, the younger child, because he's only 2.5 now. You will close opportunity for those coming after you. And that's where the cultural part comes into play, because you got people coming after you that when you do things to damage your culture, or you shut down doors for blacks because of the way you act, or whites because of the way you act, when you shut a door, you hurt everyone coming after you. You look at how African Americans look at, Caucasian people in there, and we're still hung up on racism. Well, that's because a door was shut and closed on repairing relationships at a time where one thought they were better than the other. Excuse me. And when African Americans present other cultures with the representation that is not me, that I have to separate myself from, when I'm looking at these Indian people walk past me and they feel guarded because they look at it as a black man as a threat, I only have to look at the culture as a whole and say, what have they done to damage my reputation? When I see Kodak Black eating fried chicken in the middle of the damn street, and I got to tell my kids, that is not how we act. I don't have to, I have to tell them, stay away from the bad examples instead of showing them the good examples, because people in my culture think that shit is cool. So she has to decide on whether she's going to take a journey just to make sure that her brother and other people of color can have a door open that is going to stay open long after she is passed on and people don't even know that door was held open. Not being a gatekeeper, but a key maker. And I'd explain that to my daughter, that at a young age of 10 years old, you are being thrusted on the responsibility to open a door and keep it open, because once my son comes through that door, he has to make sure he can keep it open for the next child coming in. Now, hopefully, whoever's coming in between my son and my youngest son, that 6-year gap, hopefully they could keep the door open long enough so that way I don't have to rely on my name alone to say, hey, I could tell the kid, like I told the principal in elementary school, I got not one kid that skipped, but 2 kids that skipped. So when I bring a third kid through here, I don't want to hear much talking. Just give them the test. Now I can just say, hey, I gave you 2 that skipped. Bring me the test I'm asking on, just on consignment, because I've already given you 2 that skipped. And that's where the power comes in. But we have to be aware that, you know, when I asked my daughter, she said, Dad, I want to do it to keep the opportunity for my brothers, and make sure I want to take the challenge. She wants to do the hard thing. And now we have to put the preparation in place. So I, as a father, had to allocate resources that would go towards maybe a down payment on a mortgage, maybe something. You only make certain money in a day. I don't know why people think nurses make like $30,000. We don't make $30,000 a month. Most nurses make about $80,000 to $100,000, you know, either just starting out new or somewhere in between. And most nurses average in the country make anywhere from $50 to $30 an hour, depending on the state, except for California. It's not a lot of money when you look at the fact that you walk out of, tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt out of school. Hell, I remember being about 15 years before I paid off all my loans. So I say this to you again, that you have, as a parent, have to look at where you're going to allocate resources. A lot of young people, I'm going to tell you this now, when you look at this story, that we have a tutor coming twice a week in home. Then we have a virtual tutor that's going to work on filling in the gaps with any homework and things you don't understand. He's an engineer. One's a retired algebra teacher. That costs money. You either going to have to spend money towards the things you want out of life, and your kids are going to just get the bits and crumbs, trickle down economics in your own household, or you're going to invest in the bottom, which is your children. Your children are at the bottom. You're going to allocate resources for not a return on investment, because when she passes it, we get the passing of the class, but we don't actually there's no money income because she passed algebra. We don't get $100,000 because she passed algebra. Your kids are a long-term investment, but the investment is all up front and there's no guaranteed on return. I mean, hell, my daughter may not even take care of me and tell me to go fuck myself. I don't know what's going to happen in the end of the road. But again, when people go and ask, well, why don't you have this? Why don't you have that? Because again, I'm choosing to invest in my children. You cannot do always both. You have to have more money than you make. You got to be able to cover your income, your wife's income. You got to have almost a second income to be able to afford each one of your children when you go above and beyond the standard quo, putting them in a regular school because you have a house that you could just afford. And as we know, right now with all the credit card spending, where people are spending are definitely in delinquency of credit card, even the people who own homes are in debt while they're still owning the home or paying off a mortgage, if you will, not living in the best areas. I say this all to say to you all a few things. You got to make sure that if you're investing, you got to decide home or your children. You got to do one or the other. Most people cannot do both. And 2, when you are going to put a plan in place like we're doing with my child to skip, when you go to these affluent places, remember, they're going to put walls and hurdles up. Hell, some of the stuff we didn't know until we just got to 6th grade. We didn't know this in 3rd or 4th grade. We didn't know that in 6th grade they were going to tell us about what we agreed to, which is not something we agreed to because we didn't know. It's our first child going through the school system. There are things that we let go because we didn't know any better. And now we do. So the fight is on, and then we do even better to prepare for the next child coming through. And the next child coming through, and I'm trying to tell you all, it doesn't matter where you live at, they're going to put these hurdles up against you. Because your culture is not being perceived as the one that is supposed to exceed or excel in the things that they're talking about, in math and this. And nobody's going to have a problem with an Indian person going up for an IT job, but they're not going to think a black person would know the same thing. Nobody's going to have a problem with a Caucasian person being a business owner, but they're going to look at a Caucasian person being a janitor a little different. When you out there seeing white people in the landscape become, you're like, I don't know if that's the right person. Again, your perception is going to go with what you think makes sense. So I say that all the time. Make sure that your culture is not hurting your image. And realize in affluent areas, they're going to put hurdles that you don't even know are there. I'm telling you that we're experiencing right now. But the one thing you got to do, don't sit here and cry racism. Don't cry bias. You got to fight. And when I say fight, you got to fight by showing results. Showing results is showing success. And that's how you make a statement. That's how you stick it in their face. Because when you got documentation showing that you excel, that you succeeded, that's the only thing that you can go off. Don't talk about opinions. Don't talk about what you think. Don't talk about your feelings. Let's talk about the facts. And the facts are results. And the results are numbers that show that we can do it. Phil Davis, Ancestry Lands. Thanks for staying around. Learn this. Remember, I said this before. A word from the wise is peace to your mind. Phil Davis, Ancestry Lands, and I'm out. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.